All right, welcome back. We are OOP3200, Object-Oriented Programming 2, in the fall 2020 semester at Durham College. And what are we doing today? So we've got in-class exercise 12 due Friday and Java Lab 4. I haven't quite finished doing the write-up. That's due Sunday. And today, actually, this is not right. It should say generics and Java, an intro to Javafx. Okay, so that's what we're doing today, so it's kind of really good. We're sitting here at week 13. Again, we've covered a lot of stuff already that it says here. Again, this week is worth 8% of your final grade. I'm not going to be going over the details of Java Assignment 4 today. I will try and record a separate video for this that I'll put up before Friday to help you out with what I'm looking for. The video will be very short, and the write-up should be fairly straightforward. But I want to use today's class mostly for us to really discuss Javafx primarily, and a little bit of generics. All right. It's the video to help with the lab. All it's going to do is just explain what the lab is about. Very similar to what I normally do. You know, it's actually the structure of it is going to be very similar. One thing that's missing is I've got to give you a couple of files. One of them is a person.java file, which is basically just a starter. So I'll probably give you a starter project to work with. So bear with me while I put that together. And again, it should be up within about an hour or so after class. Okay, so not too long. You can start it, and it should be self-explanatory when you look at it, but I'll go over the details of it in a little video that I'll put up shortly. Okay, so generics, we talked about C++ templates in the first half of the semester, and generics are very similar to that. What do they look like? They look like this. So notice it says angle bracket T, and this is a point class. It's almost identical to what we would see in C++. So when you look at it, well, identical in terms of the syntax, but not maybe identical in the way we do our constructors or anything else. So example would be here, T represents the type for the class, and then what we do is, of course, we use public point. That would be the constructor T for the type, and we can pass in the type. So this is an example of a point or a vector. We've been working with vectors as an example in class exercises. So here's an example where this could be a point of integers, floats, doubles, or something else. We got to be careful here that strings would be weird. You know, if you put a string as a point here, but that's how it would normally look. And I've given you an example here of what it looks like to create as an example, a setter for the point and a getter for the point. So it's pretty straightforward. Literally, it's something that you've seen before in templates. And what this would do for us is allow us to use the class, the generic class, and reduce overall code duplication, which is what generics and templates are largely about. Okay, so that's really generics. Now we're going to talk about Javafx, and this is where we're going to spend the majority of our time. Before we get there, what I want to do is I want to pull up IntelliJ IDEA, and let's do that together. I think this is a key learning, and you're going to say, like, what the heck is Javafx? And we're going to go through this in a second. I had to test it out before we started because IntelliJ has handled it slightly differently in the past, and I want to kind of talk about what it looks like today. So there's a couple of setup pre-steps to get here, and I've given you on your in your content area under the lecture, there is a link that says installing Javafx. Please go to this link, installing Javafx. And where it will take you is this little article from IntelliJ IDEA, which I think is good. And what it tells you to do is you have to download Javafx Sdk because it's an additional download as an example that we need to put into place. Okay, so notice it says modified December 3rd, 2020. This is a recent article, which is good as of this recording anyway. So if you go into this link, so if you click on this link, it's going to take you to this page, right? And where it says, depending on your operating system, this is the long-term support version. We're going to be using the bleeding edge version, of course, the latest release. And what I want you to do, if you're using a Windows 64 system, is download this link. So this is the download link for Windows 64. There's also, if you are on a Mac, you'd have to do the Mac OS SDK here. Okay, so this is the link for Mac. Hopefully you're not on a Mac, because that'll make your installation slightly more complex than mine. But if you're on a Mac, it's not like a super duper deal. You can totally do it by just following suit, and same thing with Linux or something else. So once you've downloaded the, let's say we're here and we're downloading, the Javafx Windows x64 SDK. I've clicked it, and I'm going to go to my downloads for a second. Let's make a new folder. I'm going to downloads, and notice that I have the Java SDK right here. This is it. 15, right? It's fairly large. It's about 40 megs, so it'll take a second for you to download this. What you want to do is when you decompress it into this Javafx Sdk 1501, what you want to do is you want to take this and you want to copy it in a place where it's accessible to you. It could be anywhere you want. Okay, so for example, it could be where I put it. I put it inside of C:, program files, and I have a Java folder, right? And I put it here in my Java folder. You can put this wherever you like, though. It doesn't have to be next to your Java folder. I've just put it somewhere where I can get to it. It's the same thing in on the Mac or Linux system. You have to put it in a folder or a directory that you can get access to. So here, when you put it here, there are 3 little subfolders. One is bin, another is legal, and then finally lib. We're going to be using the lib folder to install the SDK with IntelliJ IDEA. It is a project-specific install because not all projects require you to have JavaFX. By the way, why am I getting you to do JavaFX? There's going to be a little assignment, the final assignment, which is my assignment, Java Lab 5, which is going to be next week. And again, if we look at our structure just before we go on, again, this week we got this, Java Lab 5 is next week, and that's the last Java assignment, right? That'll be the one that you do for me. Okay, so that'll be the last one. It'll still be with the same as everything else, but we'll be using JavaFX, and that's why I'm going over everything with you today. So that's why we're here. Okay, so you put it in place into Java SDK. I've used 15.0.1. That's the one as of this recording. And once I've put it there, then I'm ready to launch IntelliJ IDEA into my new with my new app. Are you with me? Did you download and decompress the JavaFX SDK? If you haven't, please put X, because I'm going to lose you in a second once I go forward. Okay, I'm seeing everyone's there. I'll wait. And it's going to work different for everybody because it really depends on your system. I see I'm looking at the your participant panel here. I see some people are still not there. Hopefully you're going to be there soon. Most people are here. I'm going to wait another few seconds, then we'll go on. Okay. Waiting on a few people. Ahmed's good. A couple people left in our little class here. And again, if you're watching the video, fast forward to where we do it. Thank you, Nelson. Just one more person, and then we should be good to go. Now, this is critical, guys. That's why I'm getting you guys to do it now, because next week you'll be doing this. So that's why I really need you guys to get this all done. It's not something I can move on with unless every single one of you has it. So hopefully you'll be able to get to this. If you haven't, then you're gonna have to watch the video at this point. All right, thank you for that feedback. So I'm going to go to new project, and let's make this together now. So we're going to do, notice before we would do Java, and we would use Java Open JDK, and now we're going to move to this new template down here called Javafx. Please choose this template, Javafx. Okay, we're still using Open the Project SDK. This is important. Okay, and then I'm going to click Next. I'm going to name the project like normal. So it's, again, OOP3200 F2020, and it's lesson 13 for me. For you, it might be whatever the ICE number is for today. Finish. And now we're going to notice some issues. Once we open this project up, you're going to see under your source, and if I go to main, you're going to see a bunch of red lines like so. Yes? And if you tried to run this at this point, you would still have an issue. It would give you this crazy error that would look like this. So we're not ready. We're not quite ready for this. We need a couple of adjustments to make this work. Okay? One, we can't just, kind of find the Javafx application. Thank you for that moves down as 12. We can't find the Javafx application. We have no idea where that is. Okay? That's number one. So we need to change the project structure. Again, if you follow the directions in here, it tells you that you need to go into IntelliJ IDEA. You got to go into your, if you scroll down where it says add the Javafx library, you're going to go into File Project Structure. So that's here, File Project Structure. And what you need to do is under Libraries, we're going to click the plus button, and we're going to go into Java. It's a Java library, obviously, right? And then what we're going to do is we're going to swim to the folder that you installed Javafx. Give it a sec. And that means that if you put it in where I put it, which is inside of Program Files, Java, if this is where you put it, wherever you put it, you need to go into that folder, Javafx Sdk, into the lib folder, right, where you see a bunch of jar files, and press OK. And then it's going to say, choose module. We want to choose, obviously, the module we're working with, because we only have one. And I'm going to press OK. And now you're going to have two things, classes and sources. And then you're going to press OK. If you've done this, then Javafx will clear up for you. Are we good? I need check marks on your participants panel if you're with me. If you're not with me, X, and I'll do it again. Okay, CAFCAM. I'm going to go back. Dominic. Let's go back and do it again. So, again, what I did is I went to File, right? And under File, there is Project Structure. Project Structure, Libraries. Let's get rid of this, and I'll do it from scratch. So let's say I don't want to get this, I want that. Do it from scratch again. I'm going to click the plus button, and I'm going to swim to, when I say swim, I mean like navigate to where you put in your file structure, where you put your, where you installed or uncompressed. It has to be uncompressed, so it can't be the zip file. Make sure it's not. Your Javafx Sdk. So again, program files. Mine is in there, and I put it under Java, and it's under Javafx Sdk 1501, and in the lib folder is what you want to do, and press OK. So in there, press OK. That's what you need to do, and then press OK again. Okay, CAFCAN Dominic, are you with me? If you are, change those X's to check marks. If you're not, let me know what the problem is. Jackie, are you good? Are you watching? What's going on? Just want to make sure everyone's good here. Good, excellent. CAFCAN, how are we doing? I want to move on. I want to make sure you're okay, because you're going to be doing it with everybody else too. Awesome, thank you. Looks like everyone's good today. Wow, thank you for paying attention, guys. All right, so this is still not good enough. It's just one part. And if I press play now, you're going to see that it's going to fail. All right, so it's going to go woo, and you're like, wait, I just did what you told me to do and it's failing. You're right. There's one more step. Let's go back to that little link. So if you go back to the little link, which is here, it really tells you one more thing. We create a new project, blah, blah, blah. And then once we've done the Javafx library piece, we need to put this thing in here, which is this little link here. Now this is the confusing part for some. It says module path, path to Javafx Sdk, and blah, blah, blah. And where do we put this? Inside where it says your VM options. Let me show you how that's done. Okay, so watch carefully, and then we'll do it together. Okay, so I'm going to go back to IntelliJ. All right. Under the Run menu, there's a Run menu here. Okay. You want to go into Edit Configurations. I'm waiting. I'm going to go slow here. All right, so Run, Edit Configurations. Once you do that, you're going to have under VM Options, this is where you're going to copy paste it. There's nothing for you to plus, don't click the plus button or anything like that. You're just going to change it right here. Okay, that's what you're going to do. So just wait. Keep this window up. We're going to come back to it. Now, I'm going to go back to the link. Here's the link. And where it says to put in this, the link, which is in the VM area, this part, I'm going to copy it right now, the whole thing. So I'm going to kind of go over the whole thing, copy it. Right, there it is, copy. Just the way it is, even with the path, funny as it is. We'll replace the path in a second. All right. Go back and paste. Oops. And paste. And when you paste, you're going to see that it pulls up everything except the path is obviously wrong. Path to Java is just a placeholder, right? But the rest is here. We want to replace the path to Java with, guess what? The path to your Javafx Sdk. Now this is tricky. So where you have to go is you're going to go back to your file system. All right, here's your file system. We're going to do this a couple of times to make sure. I've put it inside of Java, program files, Java, and it's hard to see this because it's kind of occluding it. But if I right click on my File Explorer, right click here, and I go Edit Address, you're going to see the full path, which is C:, program files, Java, Javafx Sdk, blah, blah, blah. This is what you want. The actual path to this SDK, okay? And you want to go, like it says, right to the SDK, which is in the lib folder, right? That's what you want. So you want this. Okay, let's see if that makes sense. If I copy it and I lift it and put it in here. Now, what I recommend to make it easier is put it inside quotations, like so. So put it in quotations, make sure there's enough spaces, and let's see what happens. And if the lib is no good, we can take the lib out. But that's the first part. Okay, so again, all I've done is I've gone to, see if I can make this a little larger so you can see the whole thing. And you should see it on. For me, it's -- path, and my complete path to where my object is, where I've got my library, -- add modules, javafx.controls, javafx.fxml. That's all the place, that's what the whole thing is, and that is inside of VM options. Before I press OK, are you with me? Because I'm going to lose you after I do this. I know I'm going slow, but if I don't do this, guys, you will be confused. And you'll be like, wait, Tom, it doesn't work. What the heck did you do to me? And you'd be right, because this is a little bit of setup. All right? But it's a one-time cost. I'm putting my hand up and I'm saying it's a one-time cost. Once you've done this, it's a beautiful thing. You're going to love it. Okay, this is why we're doing this today. So Muzda, Nelson, Ryan, are you close? So I want to make sure you guys are good. Like I said, a little bit of setup. Awesome, you guys are all good. Okay, so if you've got the right path in here, press apply and then press OK. If you do, and if we did everything properly, and then press plus, if I press go here, then if everything goes well, we should see a little window that pops up eventually that shows us our application. And if it doesn't show up, like it's not showing up for me right now, first of all, is it showing up for you? It should be like this. Hello world. Are you with me? Do you have this? Hello world. Jackie says no. Find it. It could be somewhere on your. It popped up somewhere. Daniel says no. All right. I have an error. Let's clear this up. Okay, so let's put X's if it's not working. Put check marks if it's working. We're gonna go over this again. Daniel's like the down, the thumbs down. Okay, I got some people that it's working for and some people that are not. So again, one of the challenges is that for the hello world thing to work, let's just stop it now. And there's two ways to stop it. You can stop it here, or you can just click the X obviously on the window. All right. So let's go back to that configuration. So if I go run, right, edit configurations, and notice that the module path has to be correct. Please make sure you put it in quotation marks, right? Please make sure you point to the lib folder that's inside, not just the big folder on the outside. All right, let's look at that again. And that this should be the path in your VM options. Notice that it's there again. I didn't have to swim for it. I didn't have to put plus as an example or insert a macro. I literally put this in my VM options. All right. So let's try it again. Can I get, make sure Jackie and it looks like Kafkan, Muzda, Nelson, Ryan, make sure, and Daniel, make sure you try that again. So there's quite a few of you that are still having issues. I want to wait a little longer. That's why I've taken this time to do this compared to everything. Okay, forgot to put the quotations in. Thank you, Muzda. Is it all working now, Muzda? Awesome. Change your X into a check mark, please, so I can get a visual. That's good. Thank you. And Daniel, Kafkan, Jackie's good. I'm just looking for Daniel, Kafkan, and Ryan. Kafkan is nothing. I don't know what that means. Kafkan is still an X. No, why? Daniel, no. Daniel, what do you got there? What is the line that you put in there for your VM options? D. Wait, is that where you put it on the D drive? I wonder if that's an issue. And does it take away the red? Like in your source, or no? No. Okay, so that means that that's the problem. It's not this. It's not your path here. It's something you did. And if this is still red, if this is not, oh, you mean there's no red? Okay, that's good actually. So that means that you've installed it properly here, but the VM options got a problem. So I recommend do a couple things. Kafkan, if yours is red, that means that you've installed things incorrectly. That means you have to go back to the file project structure. And in here, you have to do the right thing with libraries. So you probably pointed to the wrong place in here in the library. It has to be in the lib folder. And it has to be, you have to make sure that in here that you have, and the way I did that, of course, when you go to plus, right? I don't have to remove it, but you have to go swim right into your lib folder in wherever you put this thing. Again, I put it in Java. You'd have to put it in the right spot. Okay, I know I'm taking a long time, guys, for other people. Please bear with me. I'm trying to make sure that everyone's on the same page. If you're not, please watch the video. There's also some great tutorials out there to help you fix your problem. Ryan, how are we doing? Ryan, I'm not getting a response from you. Are you good? Are you clean now, or are you still red? Yours is red, so that's the same problem. If yours is red here, that means you've got the Kafkan's good. Oh, okay. So, Ryan, if you hang back after class, if you have time, I'm not sure if you're going to time out later on. I'll see if I can fix you. Same thing with Daniel. If you have a problem, we can share screens, and I can take over and fix your problem. All right, let's move on. So now that we have this, all right, and we have our stuff, when we start loading, we start running, you should have, and again, I'm just on another screen here, you should have this. So guys, we're actually doing Windows programming, which is really awesome, right? And this is why I wanted to introduce Javafx to us. It is one of the, I would say, a modern way, a modern approach of creating Windows and other types of UI applications that we use through Java. There are a couple of things we do. Windows Forms obviously is another really popular but ugly method to do it. Is this Java's .NET? It's kind of like Java's .NET in the very similar way, but Javafx can be extended to work on the web just like .NET does with web forms. It used to do it. So there's a bunch of stuff, but yes, this is very similar. So if you've done Windows Forms, and I'm just guessing you have, Kafkan's working. All right, Kafkan, excellent. If you've done Windows Form in the past, and I'm guessing you have Windows Forms, Nicholas, because you're mentioning in .NET. So that's with C#. You guys did C# Windows Forms and pulled something like this up? And you're saying, yes, we did. Thank you. Awesome. Kafkan, careful. I don't know what you've taken. So I don't know. But thank you for that feedback. Cool. So this is equivalent to what we've done there. Now you may think, whoa, this is like way more work. But remember what we're doing here. We have much more control over our IDE. Visual Studio hides a lot of the stuff for us. And I wish it was the same for us with IntelliJ. It should have a plugin that automatically does all this stuff for us, but it's not configured the right way by out of the box. So that's why it's like the way it is. All right, so now that we've done this, all right, notice that it also uses a resource here called sample.fxml. There is a sample.fxml file here, which basically doesn't do much. Like, it doesn't do much. It really just, fxml is kind of like your manifest to kind of tell your JavaFX how it's going to lay things out. All right, so if you go back to main, let's get rid of some of this stuff and we'll go through it one thing at a time. So I want to get rid of this set scene thing here. All right, so I'm going to just comment it out, and I'm going to get rid of this parent root, comment that out. I want to leave the set title there. And does this still trigger? Does this still work if I run it? So if I press play, then what I'm going to get now is a much larger window. It looks like this big, right? If you took that out, it's like XAML in some ways, but it's kind of like Java's answer to kind of a layout, I would say, form, very similar to XAML. Okay, so it's pretty massive, right? So notice it says hello world here on the top left corner, which is pretty cool. And what I want to do with this hello world is let's customize it. So if we go back to the PowerPoint just for a second, I'm going to point you to where this is all looking. It talks about what JavaFX is. We use 2D and 3D graphics for this. You can see that it's very similar to what you've seen before with Windows Forms, where you have different controls. That's what they're called, just like in Windows with C#, right? Button control and so on. And what you have here is it's a different paradigm though. So what JavaFX does is it uses this idea of a root node, leaf nodes, and branch nodes. So it's kind of what we like to call a scene graph. And by the way, this tree-like structure is very similar to the way we do things in games. If you ever programmed anything with Unity, again, you have a hierarchy, and inside the hierarchy you have a game object, and inside the game object you have another game object. Same idea. Parent, child, structures. Okay, that's what it does. So this is pretty cool. And when we know that, we have to kind of configure what these are. So a root node, there's only one root node in the entire object. Branch nodes are, I want you to think of them as containers. And leaf nodes are controls for the most part. Okay, so that's what they are in terms of the way the structure is done. All right, so we have we start off an abstract class. We talked really briefly last week about abstract classes in the PowerPoint, but you should know what abstract classes are. They're blueprints for other classes. The abstract class is called application, and what we need to do, if you notice back in here, is we need to extend, our main extends the application class. So this is kind of why we chose a different template. One, it includes a bunch of stuff in here ahead of time. The second thing is it actually has this extends keyword and the application structure that we're extending. And then we have this funny thing here called start. All right, so start is, and this is where it's different than in .NET. .NET also has an application class, by the way, if you dig into it. But what we're doing here is we need to have the start method. This start method must be overridden, right? And the start method, what we're doing is we are configuring in start the primary stage as well as the title. Notice that stage, we've defined a primary stage called primary stage. You can make this whatever you want. Stage, again, we're using the theater analogy where we have, again, the idea of a stage, and inside the stage, a scene. Okay, so the scene, if you want to think about it, is, and here's an example of some code that we can use. So here, what we can do is we have a public main, right? And notice where it says launch and then arguments. This will actually do the launching part. And then we have this start method. So notice here how we don't have a launch, right? But we have this public static void. But here's launch, right? So this public static void is what we would have expected to see inside of a regular application. But notice how it's kind of, the template here in IntelliJ IDEA has made it one line, because right now this is not important. We don't touch this primarily when we code our Javafx applications. We start with this method, start. Okay, and we're going to just do a couple of things with Javafx. This week is just basic controls. Next week is a few events, and that's it. Okay, we're not going to really go into too much detail. Javafx could be the topic of multiple classes. You know, kind of weeks. We don't have multiple weeks. We maybe have two, this week and next week. And this week is just set up. I want to make sure that you guys are good to go with Javafx and anything else we put in here. All right, so let's go back to this. So this is the basic structure. And what we've done here is we said, okay, we want to trigger my primary stage. Think about the stage itself as the window. That's the window object. All right, so the windowing object itself that opens up. When we use the set title method, we set the title of the window to whatever we want, okay, as an example. And if I type in primary stage dot, and you can see that is a lot of stuff we can set up. We can set the scene, right, if we want to. We can show the primary stage. Show actually displays the window. We can close the primary stage or close the window. And there are many other options that you can set up. The style, not just the getters or setters, but also getters, and a bunch of other things that it comes with for the window itself. Okay, so you can also set things like what's the maximum height, so you can constrain your window completely, right? You can send the window to back, send it to front. You can move it around, all right? And you can see that there are a number of additional methods that are built in. We won't be able to cover all of them, right, as an example, but look, here's getX and getY. And with getX and getY, that means if there's a getter, there's chances are there's a setter. So if I go back to set height, I can set the height of the window, right, as an example. And notice here that down here we set the scene, and the scene has a we've got a random scene in here called new scene, so an anonymous scene with a height of 300 and 275. That gives us a way of doing it. But what we want to do, if I go to primary stage dot, and I start, if I go back to our not just set the title, but if I look at other setters that we can use, things like set height and set opacity, which is interesting. So how We'll try some of these today. Set width, set X and set Y, which is really the position of the window, right? And there's many other things you can do, all right? So let's try that. Let's see if we can set opacity. So primary stage, which is the window, set opacity. Let's set it to 50%. So we can say something like, again, 0.5, right? It's a double is what it takes. If you hover over, it tells you that that's what it's waiting for a double value. And it's from 0 to 1, so it's normalized. So let's see if that works. So if I run it now, and I run my window, and if everything goes well, you should see it that it is partially transparent, 50% transparent. So that's kind of the way we can do our windows. That's pretty cool, right? This is awesome. And let's also, so we can do that. Let's also do other things. So let's set X on the window. So let's say, for example, I wanted my window, or if I want to set my width of the window, just the width, right? If I want to set the width to a certain amount, again, it's double. So here's something where you have to be cautious. Is it really, what I'm really looking for, is it 300? Let's say, is that what I'm looking for, 300? Because if I do this, and if I say 300, what does that mean, right? So that's 300. Notice that there's, because I set the width, automatically my height dropped to 0. Look at that, right? There's actually a blackness in there when I try and pull it down because there's nothing in there, right? If I go set width to 300 and I say primary stage, let's do that again. And let's say set height to, so 300, let's say by 200, something small. And then I run it again, right? What do I get here? I get a window that's much smaller again, right? With this area in here. So you can definitely set the window. This is the stage. Again, think about this as the container for all containers, the root of what we're doing here. Without this, as an example, you can't draw anything in here or do anything else. By the way, we can do wonderful things in here. We can make a whole game that actually lives inside of this window if you really want to with Javafx. 3D, like it says, 2D, anything we want, okay? But we're not going to do that because we're not doing that kind of thing in this course. But that's what the setters and everything does, so it gives us some control of the window itself. We can also set max width and max height. Let's, for example, do that. So if I say primary stage dot, the max width, if I say set max width, and if I set the maximum width to a double value, let's say, for example, I never want my window to go beyond 800, right? Then let's see how that works. So if I run that, and does it work the way I'm expecting it? And this is where I would get you to try this. So here's width. Let's see if I try this. I go, well, I'll pull it up, and oh man, I mean, it did it. That's the maximum width, and it won't allow me to go further, by the way. But there's also a bit of blackness in here, right? What the heck? Why is it all black like this? Well, we set the width to 300 right now, right? And we never made an event or anything like that to say that when I expand this, the maximum width is 300, right? So this is a constraint, but the actual width itself is still only 300. That's the way this works. And I wanted to point this out to you because you might be, I don't know, unfamiliar, or your intuition might tell you it should work a different way, but it's not. Okay? Even if I maximize the window, you're going to see that I'm going to have a weird looking container. Okay? So that's something that we can try. Same thing with max height. If I say primary stage dot set max height, right? Set max height, let's say to 600. Let's say I never want the window to be larger than 600 tall and 800 wide, right? And if I was to do that, at first we're going to get the set width and set height value to whatever we have. So again, here it is. But as soon as we expand it, we can see that I can move maximum 800 by 600 and just nothing I can do to expand beyond that. This is a pretty good constraint. Same thing is if I don't want to go below a certain level. So that's what that does. So if I go again, intuitively, if you did this, so if you said primary stage, that set minimum height. Let's say my minimum height is going to be, I want to make it so the minimum height is like the height of a cell phone. So 320 by 480. Let's say my minimum height is 480. and I want my minimum width to be 320. So primary stage that set min width, let's say, is 320. So I say I want to make it so its minimum width and height is the size of a phone, and I want to set my width and height to the size of a phone, so 320 old phones by 480, right? This is like an iPhone 4 equivalent, right? Let's try this out. You'll see that at first it'll do exactly what I want. Here's my my width and height. It's kind of in the same proportions as a phone, old style phone, but I can make it bigger. But you know, as an example, I can't go beyond 800, so it's kind of weird, right? And I can't go smaller than, if I want to, than 320 by 480. So that's what it does. It's a constraint. Okay. So that's what these things do. Primary stage, it controls the window. Okay, not the stuff inside the window. The stuff inside the window, think about it as, and if I was going to draw this out for you, and it's the same thing, by the way, in Windows Forms. It doesn't matter the system. I'm going to see if I can pull this out for you here. So I'm just going to, let's look at this as a, sorry, I'm just going to do this, and I'm just going to bring my tablet here. So imagine we're on a whiteboard here, okay? That's why I'm using this thing. So can you imagine that we have a window? Here's our window. And inside the window, and this would be, like I said, so high level concept stuff. This would be the stage, right? I know, Autodesk. Here's our stage. And then inside of our stage, we have another container, right? Which is in here, right? Now, usually it's the same size of the stage, but it doesn't have to be. This is our scene, okay? So our scene, if you think about what this is kind of where we're going to draw things in here. Our scene is actually going to render or draw anything we put into it. So if I put a label in here, let's say label like hello world, right? Then this label is an object that is going to be inside of the stage. In fact, we can say that the label is a child of the scene object. All right, so the scene object is a child of the stage object. Remember that whole hierarchy? And the label is a child of the scene object. Okay? But we don't just have controls in scenes, we also have other containers that we use because we have branches, right? So if the scene is our root container, then we also have a branch that we have inside here. Just like the scene is the root container for control, the stage is the root container for scene, where stage is the actual window itself. Okay, so if that's the case, what we really need is, and if you look at the PowerPoint configuration here, right, it talks about that as the application, what that is, and as well as how things work. I'm going to skip through this, but what we want to do is create a scene, and what the scene does is it gives us you know, kind of a very simple, where did I put the scene? Did I cut it out? I love when I don't include something that I expected to be included, but basically what we want is we want to make a new scene, guys. Let's do that. So it doesn't matter. So instead of making an anonymous scene like we have here, let's make a new scene. So let's get rid of all this. And let's make a new scene. So scene, if I press the thing scene in there, notice that it's going to come up with the scene. It's trying to figure out what scene I mean. Of course, I mean scene from Javafx scene. So if I double click here, it's going to activate the scene import up here. Okay, that's important to do. So let's say, for example, I call this scene, lowercase scene. I want to make it a new scene, right? And in the new scene, as an example, can I do this? Can I do this? Scene. Well, the scene itself takes in some additional information. All right. So one thing we need to do is, if I pass it in, it asks for a couple things. What is the scene's parent? Well, the scene's parent is obviously the primary stage. That's what the scene's parent is. Okay. And the next part is, can you give me the default size of my scene, right? And I can give hard-coded values like it's showing down here, right? But instead, what it might be a good idea is to set up those hard-coded values somewhere else. You could put another file in place or whatever, like for example, some kind of configuration file as an example. Or we can put it as public static objects up here. So we can say public static, we want 2 integers, right? One would be width, right? Which we'll set up as, let's say for example, we'll make it 640 by 480, so 640, right? And public static int height, and we'll make that 480. So why would we do this? Because we never want to kind of hard code it. We want to be able to, and this is one place where I can change maybe a bunch of other things later on. So primary stage dot width and height. And this would, what this will do, it should satisfy the requirements. But tell me, what do you think it doesn't? Because it says here, I'm trying to do this primary stage stuff, right? Well, look what it says here. Root is what we're looking at, right? But there is no root. I've taken that away, right? So what would you recommend here would be the fix? And again, I want you guys to think about this slightly, right? If you go to the PowerPoint, it might give you a hint. So notice that if I scroll down here, we have a label, and then what we want to do is we want to put together this scene. Without the scene, and here's the a new scene, right? We want to pass into the scene, as an example, some kind of container object, right? As an example. We don't have a container object to pull in, and we're going to talk about what container objects are, right? So again, look at the stages for our scene. We need to create controls that are going to be in the scene. We need to create a layout container first that goes in there because we don't have some kind of root container. And then what we need to do is create a scene object and attach it to the stage. That's what we need to do. All right, so we haven't done all of it yet. So let's make our label control first. So again, let's leave that red for now. And we want to make a label container. So we'll say label. And label control. And notice again, don't want to choose Java AWT. Okay? I don't want to choose JDK JFR. I want to choose Javafx, this one. All right? It's important. It's going to activate another import up here. Okay? That's what we want. So label, let's call this hello label, right? And I want to make a new label. And inside there, it's going to be just hello world, right? Hello world. Okay, so that's number one. We have a control. So again, this is kind of like a step, because look what it says. It says if you look at creating scenes, I need a control. So this is like step one. Step one, right? I have something to put on my scene. So create some kind of control. Okay. Step two, I need a container for this control to be inside of, because unfortunately we need some kind of root container that the scene will be attached to, right? So think about that. So we need a container. Step two, create a container. There are different types of containers, lots of them. The main ones that we're going to be focusing on here are these three: an Hbox, a Vbox, or a grid pane. All right, those are the three that are very common, right? We're going to start off with an Hbox, okay? So an Hbox is another kind of container where we can say, notice that we can attach, once we have a label like this, we can attach the label into an Hbox. The Hbox obviously is a horizontal box or horizontal layout, all right? So here we're going to say that Hbox, notice again, I want to choose Javafx scene layout, right, that one. We're going to call this Hbox, lowercase, right, is equal to a new Hbox, right? Now this doesn't require anything, right? There we go. But I want to pass in my label in the Hbox. Here's another thing. Can I do this? Can I say Hbox dot, and then what about if I want to add, or you know, I want to add something to the label? I can't do it necessarily like this. In our example, right, we're passing the message label into the Hbox. Okay, so how do I set? I can set spacing. I can set you know, borders. I can set effects. I can set my layouts, my maximum size. This is a bunch of different things. And when we look at our paradigm again, I want you to think about, and if I just undo this, so no label, what I want you to think about is here's the scene, right? And then inside the scene, we're prepping, right? There's another container, let's say, that's in here. When this container here is, it could be different kinds of containers. We're going to just call we're going to use this the Hbox, but you can use any kind of container you want. Hbox, horizontal box, vertical layout, or grid pane as an example. And inside that, we want a control, whatever the control is. And it's going to be, the controls are going to be put in horizontal values like this. So control, and there'll be another control next to that one, and so on. Okay, they're going to be next to it because it's horizontal. By the way, you can embed one container inside of another. All right, so when I look at the Hbox, right, and I'm just going to show you, like, if you didn't tell Hbox that there's a control that's in it, how do I attach, you know, an object into an Hbox afterwards? So we have a bunch of things. We have get accessibility, get blend modes, and I want to go through this because there's different things. Get different effects, get an ID, right? Get layout for it. That means we can set the layout. We have on drag entered, on drag one, we can drag and drop into our box. All right, so all the same kind of events. On mouse clicked, we can detect different events. These are events that we can use. And you should be familiar with events if you've done .NET. All right, so it's very similar. Swipe down, touches, zooms, a bunch of different things. Also the opacity, which means we can set the opacity, properties, scale X and scale Y, shapes, you know, all kinds of different things, transforms, and this is interesting. Get transforms and translate X, Y, and Z. We can move the box around as a container, and anything inside the box will also move. Is it pressed? Am I hovering over it? Is it visible or not? You know, that kind of stuff. If I have a thing like it's visible, that means I probably can control its visibility, right? Again, just being intuitive. I can look up, I can set the max and min width, notify. I know I'm going really quick here, but you should explore this stuff too, right? As we go through it. So, parent to local. I'm just going to go through, remove event filter, resize it, scale, and then we start getting into all the setters. Set accessibility, set background, which is kind of interesting. Set border, right? Do I want to set a border of a type? Clips, cursors, effects, layouts, min and maximum height, mouse transparent. If when I go enter there, the mouse becomes transparent, it's a Boolean, or true or false, and so on. One thing that I really loved with Visual Studio and was controls that I could see in a property bar on the right hand side. And it would have made it be nice if we had that capability here. Set, on, rotate, zoom, and so on, opacity, rotate, and scale. But as you can see, that there isn't really a way that you can see to attach it in any other way. All right, what about then the label? What if I said, hey, I got a label and I want to do something with the label. Can I do some kind of set? Well, again, take a look. A label is also has a lot of the same things. Set disabled, set fonts, you know, whatever, right? What about, can I do some kind of attachment or adding? I can add an event filter. I can't really, it says local to parent, right? And what I want to do is if I said, what about something like content display or cursor or anything like that? Can I do parent to local, get parent? If I get parent, then maybe I can do set parent. Is there such a thing? The answer is no. Or how about if I just said parent, right? Again, we're trying to be intuitive here, right? In terms of how this works. So we can get the parent, but we can't really set the parent. Okay, just pointing this out so that you're totally clear. So that means that if I pass the label in here, so if I said hello label, then right now what's happening is hello label is going to be, we're using a constructor object to assign a node, right? And if you hover over, it says scene.node, Javafx scene node, and I can attach a node to all these things, right? Hbox dot node orientation, get style node, get node orientation. Really, that's what it does here, and that's good. Now, once we've set up the Hbox, right, I can use Hbox as the root container for inside of my scene. So I can say, well, inside there, I want to use Hbox, and I want to set up the width and the height of my scene. Let's try that out and see what happens, right, with this whole thing. And I get a massive window again, and there's no hello world. What the hell? What happened to it? Why? Well, we never did anything with this scene. We made a scene, yes, but we never attached it to the primary stage. So again, if you go back to the steps, we did this. That's nice, but look at the steps that it had up here for 1, 2, 3. 1, make controls. 2, create a layout container. 3, create a scene and add the layout container to the scene, right? And then 4, add the scene to the stage. So that's one thing we didn't do. So here is step 3, right? Add layout container to scene, right? And step 4 would be add scene to stage. Without adding the scene to the stage, we have no way of doing this. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this little thing we cut out from the before, and we're going to say, instead of making a new scene with a root of 375 and so on, we're going to change this and just put in our scene, which is called scene. Okay, and then, so this is number 4, and then number 5, right, we want to actually show the stage. If I don't have this piece, there's no window if I don't do the show. All right, so again, if I was to try it now, you can see that we're going to get a window that is 640 by 480, and we see that there is right at the edge, right here, we've got our container object. Now, the container, right, which is our scene is 640 by 480, right? That's what this is. But our container, right, I mean, how big is that? And what else can we do? Remember, we have that Hbox, right? And the Hbox allows us to do additional things. So if I put another label in place, let's say, for example, I have, I want to make another label. We're going to call it goodbye label, right? And we're going to say this new label, right, is going to be called goodbye, right? And I want to attach this label also to my Hbox. Well, then I just put it in series. So I can say something like goodbye label. I want to attach that too, right? And when I go back, and if I re-trigger this build and see what happens, then I got both of them. Look at that, right next to each other. In fact, exactly next to each other, right? So this is where the layout is going to come in. Next week, we're going to focus more on how to set this up. But let's do some investigation, right, on what this stuff does. Okay, so if I go to Hbox, right, as an example, and if I press Control-click, you can see Hbox. So Control-click actually does an inspection. That's what it does here. So if I go back, let's go back to that. So if I look at Hbox, hover over, it gives me this, right? If I click onto this, as an example, it allows me to look at this stuff, and it says extends Javafx scene layout pane, right? That's nice, right? That's what this does. But if I left click, so control and left click on this, notice left click makes it into a link. It actually opens up, it inspects the actual class. So here's our class, Hbox, which extends pane, okay? And then you can see all of its beautiful, constructors. You can inspect it. You can look at what it does. These are specific to Hbox only. Set alignment, right? Set alignment, get alignment for the Hbox. Set fill weight and fill height. Get content bias and a bunch of other stuff that's specific to the Hbox. Okay, that's what this does. And then if I click on this, if I go Control and go into Pane, you can see how the Pane extends region. All right, so Pane, again, if you look at set constraint, it has get constraint and set constraint. That's part of all panes. Notice that I can also, there's an observable list that has get children. I wonder if I can do that if I was to go to Hbox and go back out to main. If Hbox inherits from Pane and Pane inherits from region, can I use get children? Wonder what that is. Let's try that out. So if I said Hbox.get children, notice that that is something that I can get at. We're talking about inheritance and polymorphism this week anyway. So if I said get, it's an observable list that I can kind of get to all the children that are made up of this thing, and I'm pretty sure if I said get children and if I go dot, it creates a list type, right? So some kind of node. If I said var children is equal to hbox.getChildren, and if I was to look at what this is, notice it kind of casts it as an observable list of type node. Square these angle brackets again. We just talked about generics this week, which are like templates. This is a type. Node is the type. Okay, so hbox get children. We have an observable list of type node. All right, so that's something that we can look at, and I got that by skimming into the Pane class or the region class. Pane extends region. Let's go into the region class now. Let's keep going. Another level. Here's the region class. Region has way more stuff, right? The size and a bunch of stuff, and this is how it's built up. All right, let's keep going. Let's keep going. I like digging into things like this. Parent. Let's go to parent. Here's the parent class. Parent class extends node. Hold on. Here's the node class. I'm clicking into node, right? And it takes a little bit of time, no? And you can see all the imports, a ton of imports for these things. And the node class implements. Okay, this is where it stops. So node is the superclass of all classes so far inside of for Hbox and for containers, right? Take a look. So node implements event target and styleable. That means anything that is a node type, I can do something with it from an event perspective, and I can style it. I can add styling, okay, which is very interesting. So it's styleable. These two things are interfaces. That's what they are. Remember that Java does not support multiple inheritance. And so what this does is it tells us we're implementing two interfaces. So if I go to event target only has, it's an interface that has something called an event dispatch chain, right? And that's the return type. And the method that's in there is build event dispatch chain, right? Because what we want is to create an event dispatch chain for all this stuff. Let's go back out there. I want to go to Styleable now, and Styleable allows us to do things like get style and set style. Get style and actually what it does, it doesn't allow us to set style, it allows us to get information about our style. So that's what Styleable is. All right. So why am I showing you all this? Because I want to understand. We were talking about inheritance and polymorphism this entire semester, right? And if I was to redraw this stuff, forget this for a second. If I was to redraw this stuff, remember we talked about this before. If you have a root class that's up here, as an example, and this is, let's say, whatever this class is, it's the root class. And if I start going down the line, you can simply see in this example that if I was to, draw a couple of things here. Let's draw we did this with our UML. So here's our root class, right? And underneath that we have another class, whatever that is, right? We're going to make it bigger like this. And we have another class, and that one is going to be even bigger. And we have another class, and that one is going to be really massive, okay, really big here like this. You can see as we keep inheriting, we have this inheritance chain that we've talked about this entire semester, where it kind of goes like this. Actually, it's a one-way inheritance chain right now. We don't know if there's other children. We don't care about the other children. All I care about is my root class and how I keep on getting bigger and bigger. Why am I telling you this? Because, my friends, look at this crazy structure that we've got going on to make a window. That means that what we have is massive, a massive amount of lines of code. Right now, just for node class, our node class is sitting at, I'm just going to move it, 5,000 lines of code. All right, so remember that our node class parent inherits from node. So 5,000 lines of code. And then if we go here and we look at this, there's another 1,400 lines of code here. So far we're into the 6,500 layer or level, right? And then parent, which inherits from region, or sorry, region that inherits from parent. So 6,500 lines plus another 2,500 lines. So we're like about 9,000 lines of code so far. Pane inherits, is the main thing. So 9,000 plus another, okay, piddly amount, 58, right? Hbox, it's getting smaller, but let's say another 500, and with the other one, another 550. So almost 10,000 lines of code before we get to this. 10,000 lines of code to make an Hbox, my friends. This is the lesson that I wanted to show you here, right? Because that is more realistic when it comes to the amount of work that has to be done. So going back to this, the question I have to ask you is inheritance a good thing, right? Because one thing builds and another thing builds and another thing, and some people look at inheritance as not a good thing. They make bad names for inheritance. Why? Because of this crazy structure, right? One more example. So that is just the Hbox. So what about scene? So if I click on scene and do the same exercise, and if I go all the way to the top, right? So scene, so Hbox we know is about 10,000 lines of code. That's what it works out to be. Scene, okay, which by itself is, let's say, 5,000 lines of code, just by itself, just scene, right? If I go to what it implements, which is event target, again, it's only, remember, we know event target, we've seen that before, right? It's only a couple lines of code, so it's not so bad, event target. But the scene class itself is 5,000 lines of code. So going back to main, just to put this line here to make it work, and this line here to make this work, we're looking at 15,000 lines of code right here, guys. All right? And let's look at label. Label is a control type, right? So label, and let's see what label looks like. Label extends labeled. Okay, this is interesting. And if you notice, label is not so big. It's like 100 lines of code. Labeled, all right? Well, that is much larger. We're looking at about another 750 lines. We're looking at, let's say, 1,000 lines of code for label so far. And then it extends control, and look at this, extends region. So this one, control, so 1,000 plus, let's say, another 500 or 600, 1,600. We know region, what that is, 1,600 plus another, let's say, 2,500. So that is, right? 4,100 lines of code so far, right? For my label, 4,100 lines of code, right? And then we know parent, what it did before, but we'll go into that again. Parent, 4,100 lines of code plus another, let's say 1,500 lines, right? So 5,600 lines of code, right? And node, we know node is massive. Node is another, let's say, 5,000 lines of code. Guys, a label is more complex than the other stuff because it's a control. Does it make sense? Label, the label class is actually another, let's say, 15,000 lines of code. Just this label class. Right? It's huge, guys. It's massive, right? So I wanted to point this out. And by the way, it's no different in any way compared to something that you would do on Windows Forms or on something else. All right, it is quite massive, like huge. All right, so that's why I wanted to point this out. Okay, what about if intuitively we want to make a button instead of this label? We want to make a button that's like a click me button. We'll call it click me. So we'll say button. All right, and it's not in your PowerPoint. Let's do it together. Button. We'll call it the click me button is equal to a new button. Okay, so now it says that it needs a string. So look what it says here. When I open it up, the constructor function tells me, if I just did this, by the way, this is okay, but what things can I do with a button? All right, so if I go to scene button, it extends something called button base. I'm not going to go into the details here, but can I put a button name? So for example, my button name would be something like click me. Okay, and if I just did this, the click me button, and I added the click me button to the container and I ran it, it doesn't do anything right now. It just maybe will show the click me button. Yeah, it gives me this clickable thing, but it's like hugging this part right here. Again, we need something to do with layout to make this better. What if instead of using a Hbox, we don't want to use an Hbox, but instead of using an Hbox, we wanted to add in a Vbox instead. So a Vbox is a vertical box, right? And here's Vbox. That's equal to a new Vbox. We can kind of intuit we want to put in the hello label as well as the click me button. And let's comment out the Hbox just for a second, just to see what that looks like. And let's put the Vbox in there instead of the Hbox. And if I was to run this thing, you're going to get what you think you're going to get, which is a horizontal layout, right? Where I have my hello world here and my click me button right there. A little bit more palatable, wouldn't you think, compared to the horizontal layout, because even though there's no separation, at least these are separate, right? Okay, cool. And that's pretty cool, right? I mean, like, you know, in terms of layout, so I can go horizontal layout, vertical layout, and we're going to do some searching in a second. I'm going to go up online and look at the Javafx documentation where I can point you to some of this stuff, right? But what about the grid plane, right, that we talked about before? So again, inside here, I've given you a couple of different examples. One of them is a Vbox, an Hbox, and a grid pane. Okay, so grid pane does something like this, right? Notice that there's no separation that it shows here, right, in the grid box. And even the Hbox container that we have right now, if you go through it and the examples, there is no separation because we haven't talked about layout in any way. That's what we haven't done about, right? So, and we've done this. This is the preferred size of the scene. We've gone all the way down to the end of the PowerPoint, but we don't have anything about grid pane. Why? Well, let me show you why. So let's try this. So if I'm going to say grid pane is, we'll call it grid pane, is equal to a new grid pane, and you're happy with this, right? I mean, you know, I want to kind of do the same thing. I want to put in my hello label and my click me button. And what's going on here? How come I can't do it this way? It's a grid pane. It needs more configuration than the other stuff, right? And let's look at the grid pane documentation to see what I need. So if I was to go up to the web, and let's go to Javafx grid pane, Javafx grid pane, right? And here's documentation, oracle.com, Javafx. Now this is Javafx 8, but it's good enough for us. And if we looked at a grid pane, it gives us a few examples of code. So grid pane set row index, grid pane set column index, right? So first thing I do is I make a new grid pane by itself. So this would have to be gone because there is no container like this, right? This is where it's a little bit more challenging. And then what I want to do is, it says I have a new button, yes, right? And I want to set the row and column index of that button right into the grid pane, right? So row and column index. Or I can do it this way. I can say grid pane.add right? Which I think is a little bit easier. So row, column, right? And that's another way to do it. You can also, I want to kind of add all. So don't forget to add children to the grid pane, right? You can do it this way. So here's row and column index, right? Let's look at some convenience methods. I want to say grid pane dot, and I want to add a node, and it says int I1. So row and column index. So I want a node. I want to add the hello label, right? And I want to add it to, and I notice what it says, 1, 0. So that's row column, or column row, right? So column row, just like this, column row column. So it was column row, column first. So I want to go column 1, row 0, all right? And I want a grid pane dot add, and we'll say that the button, click me button, we'll go into, and we'll say it's going to be row column 1, row 1. Okay, so that's going to be something we're going to put in a different spot. And then once we have this grid pane, let's add grid pane to the scene view, and let's see what that looks like. Does that compute? Is that good enough for us, being intuitive? And the answer is it looks the same. What about if I wanted to put that in some other spot? Let's say instead of 1, 0, and 1, 1, I wanted to put it in some other column, like 2, 2, 1. So what does that do for us? If I was to do this, then it's exactly what you think it's going to do. It's right here. So the grid is actually takes up the entire screen, and you can put this button anywhere you like. This reminds me of the old table view cells back in the old days of JavaScript, and the way we used everything was tables in the past, because we kind of used tables to kind of put everything in place here. All right, so that's what this is looking like to me, right? So let's say if I put it back, and instead of 2, 1, I said 2, 2. Let's add some separation here. And if I was to run it, like, where can I put this thing? Can I put it anywhere I want? And the answer is no, right? So even though it says, so column 2, row 2, but there is no row 1. Well, row 2, this actually is in row 2, but there's nothing in row 1, so it compresses everything so it's together. And what I mean by that is when it draws stuff, and this is, again, it's maybe not intuitive for you, but the idea here is that when you do a layout with the grid, so let's say this is your grid, and if you have something in the first column, then it will create your cells for you, right? But if you have nothing in the second row, then what it'll do is it'll just make the row really, really small, like this. Like, it's really small. And so this is, in effect, in row 3, but there's nothing in row 2, so therefore it looks like it's in row 2. All right? So that's what that looks like. That's what that is looking like right there. All right? And the way to fix that is, what if I put the same, can I put the same instance of a button or something else somewhere else? So for example, let's say I said grid pane, we haven't tried that before, .add, and I want to put, let's get that goodbye label, right? Because we want to get, we have a hello label, we have a up here, but I want to make a goodbye label. Let's try that again. So we'll say goodbye label. We'll say goodbye over here. Okay. And I want to take that and put it inside here, goodbye label, and I want to put it into where the other one was. So column 1, right, row 1. So that's underneath what we have right now. All right. And let's see what happens to my click me button now. So if I go back and I run this again, well, I get what I expected, which now you can see clearly that this is in the right position. Okay, well, this was always there, but this goodbye label was there was nothing there before, So because goodbye label was so tiny, or there was no tiny, it was the row was tiny, then that's why it looked like there was no separation. Okay? So kind of an interesting way of laying things out. Going back to the documentation here, we can set. So column 1, it has a lot of additional settings. Set preference size, preferred size. That's what this do. Set maximum size, and it does all the summaries here online, which is really, really good. What about buttons? So if I wanted not to do it says region. You can see the here it shows you the entire package, right, for this. And let's see if I wanted to do a Javafx button. Let's take a look at that for a second. So we're going to go back into the Oracle documentation here. So again, you can see the hierarchy that we talked about before. Button base is what this is. And I want to put a button in place, the button class. So button is equal to a new button, click me, right? And notice it has inherited from Java scene control button base, armed and on action. Armed and on action. So if we can intuit what this looks like, here's some constructors. The first constructor is what we use, which is button string. The other one is button string and a graphic that we can kind of in place there, which is different than what it is, right? We have a bunch of methods, right? So is cancel button, is default button, is set cancel button, set default button, right? That's what these are. And what these things do, right, is it for the form, it sets up the this button as a cancel button or a default button for the entire form. If you wanted to make a form that was specific, all right, to this thing. And there's a bunch of other methods here that I'm not going to go into. All right, so these are all the different methods. Okay, let's see if we can get a button example really quickly, and then we'll stop for the day. All right, so if I said, what about if I looked at a Javafx button example? All right. So here's my Javafx button, and he's got a tutorial on how to do that. He's put together a little example of a button and a scene and all the regular stuff that we've seen before. Yay, button. Here's our button text. We can set up our button text size and a wrap. He's got this thing. He can decide on a font. Now this is new. I want to set up a font for a certain type. I can configure my button, right? So once I make my button, I can set font. Let's try that out. That's a great idea. I want to make my button look really special, all right? I want to use special in a quote-unquote special, right? So my click me button, I want to make a new font. So font, right, as an example. Now it says font. Oh, let's go back. Ooh. Can't go so fast, Tom, right? I don't want a font Java AWT. I want a font Javafx. So I want to go here, font is equal to a new font. And I want to pick, like it says here. I'm just looking at the documentation here, and I'm saying, wait, I want to do what this guy does. Courier new, font weight bold 36. I want to say, instead of Courier new, I know that the system font will be Consolus. It's an ugly font too, but it's the font that I like to use. So font type is Consolus. Font size, right? Or sorry, this is the styling that I put in here, and it says a double V, right? So double V is font weight, whatever I want. So let's put that in. So I say font weight dot, and then I can choose what I want. For example, bold. I like bold. That's just an enumeration. That's what that is. And then I want the size to be something that I put in there. So let's make it 40. Massive. A really massive button. All right. And we got a bit of an issue. It says cannot resolve constructor font la 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 la, right? So take a look at that, right? Courier new font is what we missed. Font, right? I want to make a new font of this, and when I do this, it says, right? It says that just like we did before, font is trying to do it, and it doesn't know what the heck I'm talking about, right? So if I did that, because it says font.font. And do I do new? Oh, that's what I did. I did wrong. So it's actually a, sorry, it's a static object that I'm creating. So I'm using a font factory. That's what I'm using the font class as a static object. Remember, just like we did vector. Font, making a new font type, right? As an example of console list, font weight bold 40. Let's try that out and let's run it. And what? That's not font type. Well, because we didn't apply it, right? We want to set the font to the button. We're going to say click me button dot set font and pass in font, right? And now let's try and see what that does. So we're actually modifying the font manually, and it's a massive click me button now. Massive, and it's exactly what I wanted in terms of style, right? Guys, if you've ever done any kind of UI programming before, it's starting to become familiar to you in terms of the things that we can do, right? Because really, once we have this, the only thing we have left to do is some kind of event, right? So it says diff default button mode, or we can use a button image, and it talks about the whole thing in terms of button size. And here's where we want to get to. We want to make a button event, and this is fantastic. Take a look at this. So this button event, I'm just going to scroll in here. We're going to cover this more next week. But this button event is actually what we like to call an anonymous function, a new event handler, right? Where we override the handle and we do something in here. Okay, let's see if we can manage to do this probably. So I'm going to grab this, set action, and I'm going to go back to the button, right, which is my button itself. So I'm going to say click me button dot and then paste, and it's going to go, whoa, what are you talking about here? And it says event handler. It doesn't even know what this is. It says I have multiple choices for this. Let's write this together. So if I was going to rewrite this, we want the right import event handler, right? That's what I want. Javafx event handler, right? Action event is the type of handler that I want, and it actually gives me this little override for me, right? So I'm just going to get rid of all this because it kind of copied what I already had, right? Because I copy pasted. And we don't need this part. I think I've got an extra brace. Yeah, there we go. So that's how it looks. That's kind of our little thing. So let's do something in here. Text. What I want to do is do a, let's say, a system.out.println, and I want to say something like click me button clicked, right? So I want to click that. When I click on the button, I want to see kind of some kind of system.out.println event that does that. Let's try that out. By the way, I'll put this up on GitHub for you guys for your in-class exercise afterwards. If I click it, then yay, it does the event. There's event handling, right? We can click on as many times as we want, and we've got this stuff, right? So that's pretty straightforward, I think. The thing that makes it not straightforward is this ugly thing, right? Which is, what is this? It's an anonymous event handler. That's what it is. Where we have this inner method called handle, and the handle event handles this. Now, here's something that would be interesting. Do we have an option? Do we have access to our label, our goodbye label and our hello label? Do you think we have access to those things up there? Let's take a look. So if I said like hello label dot, and I want to change the text, right, of the property. So my text property, I want to set text, right, to another thing. Let's say, for example, I want to set it to clicked, right? I want to system.out.println, but I also want to set my hello label to clicked. Let's see if that works. And then we've done everything today. So if I run it, and I go down to here, and I click my button, then it says clicked. I know. It's super exciting for you guys too. But the idea that is here is that, wow, this is a lot of information, And let's go over one more time before we go for the day what we've done. We're using Javafx for a UI to create user interfaces, right? And we've set up a couple of things here. First, we set up our objects, our controls. We can create controls, more than one, right? So we can say, how about one or more controls? That might be the best way to say it. So we create one or more controls. Here, we're going to put another step in here, step 1.1, which is, let's put in a step that says, configure your controls, which is what we did with our button. We configured it so that way we changed the font to font weight bold, and we made it 40. That's maybe a little bit too big. We'll chop it down to 20, right? We also made our, oh, that is really ugly. We made a click me button with a capital U. Oh my gosh, and no one said anything about this at all. You guys didn't say, Tom, you spelled button wrong, right? You just let me do it. That's awesome. Thanks, guys. But it is what it is, right? So, yeah. And of course, we have to change that down here too, because then it's not going to be in the right spot. All right. So we configure our controls. We make controls. And after we make the control, right, we configure the control, right? So make the control first. And after we make the control, we configure the control. Let's put that down there. So again, step 1.1, configure your control. Once we've done that, maybe what we want to do for button controls, step 1.2, for button controls or other event types that we want to use, right? You want to set the event, right? Whatever the event is. In this case, it's just an action, and the action is the default action for the button, which is a click, right? If it was another type of control instead of a button, and there's many other types, for example, if it was a slider control or some other kind of event or a control, that'd be something different, right? So we set the action. Then we create a container, whether it's an Hbox or Vbox. Here we've created a grid pane just to make it more challenging. And then we add the container to the scene, we add the scene to the stage, and voila, we have an object. Okay, and then if we look at the final version, then we're going to do a smaller version of the button that does this, right? Now notice that the click didn't change because it's already changed the text. All right, that's it. Let's put this up on GitHub so you have something to submit for your ICE, which I think is pretty good. Again, I'm going to use the VCS tools here this time around. So I'm going to go VCS, right? And I want to enable version control with Git. And once I've done that, I want to set up my remote and all that kind of stuff. So I'm going to go to commit. And under commit, I'm going to grab all these files and do an initial commit. Here's my commit. It's my initial commit. And it says commit anyway. Awesome. And then what I want to do is I want to do a push. So notice there's a little push arrow that goes this way, but I don't have a remote. Let's configure one. And it asked me for a remote for my URL. I'm just going to pop in to my remote online. So I'm going to go online to make a new remote. I'm going to go to github.com, Durham Programmer, and I'm going to make a new remote, which is OOP3200 and F2020 ICE 12, as you nicely pointed out. Thank you for that. And when I do that, everything should go well. I have now my GitHub discussions. Cool. It's all new stuff. I have my link, which is right here. And I put that link in here and press OK. That gives me my connection to my master. And then if I press push, it'll grab everything and push it up to GitHub. Let's take a look and see if that's true, where I have everything up on GitHub here. So you have my GitHub link. And again, what I want is if I add a README, something like OOP this. So this is in-class exercise demo for week 13 at Durham, right? Which is, if I can spell college instead of collage, right? That's nice. And create a new thing. Now I'm behind, and I want to grab this link so I can just pull, and pulling allows me to merge my incoming changes. Well, I really don't know what I pulled, because remember, inside of my project files, I didn't have a README before, but I do now. So here's my README file, right, which actually shows me what it's going to look like online. All stuff we've done before, guys, and now the only thing that's left is to grab this link, right? Let's go here, grab this link, and put it up on Durham, our little DC Connect, which is it here? It is. For in-class exercise. So that's where it's going to be. So we're going to say, I'm going to add a new URL, which is my week 13 GitHub link. Okay, so you should have all that stuff and more. Now, remember that after this, I'm going to go and finish off just translating my version of Lab 4, Java Lab 4, which is what's coming up. So notice that we've done everything and more that I've covered here in the PowerPoint. And all we're waiting for is Java Lab 4, which is due Sunday again. And next week will be our, just to let you know, after this week, we have only 1 week left. Next week, we'll complete our examples in class for Javafx. Notice that we've covered way more than what we should have already. You've already done some of the stuff we've talked about here, up here, okay, way up here you've done it, and even before this. So we've already covered all the course content that you need to do your Java Lab 4, which is the one that's going to be up today, right? And for Java Lab 5, I'm going to get you to make some kind of user interface application that shows something, and that's why you need to make sure you configure Javafx as I've shown you today in class, so that you're ready to go for next week. Okay? Your quiz, it's not quiz 1, it'll be the next quiz. That's so it's a kind of a heavier weighted week next week, where we have your assignments and quizzes and everything together. So next week is worth 13% of your final grade. Please plan to attend, as and this way it'll cover everything you need. Okay. Again, as normal, all labs will be partnered, and quizzes will be individual. In-class exercise individual. So you're looking at we're wrapping up everything. Our last lecture effectively will be next Wednesday. But I will make myself available on the Friday if you need anything. All right, that's next Friday during regular class time. Okay, we haven't really met during that class time this semester, but we're there virtually. So I'm going to give you your time back to do your lab. I recommend you get it done before Sunday, as things are rolling really fast and furious right now for you guys this semester. Okay, questions about Javafx or anything else that we've talked about today? I know I kind of zoomed by generics, but they're very similar to templates, which you'll know. Okay, guys, thank you so much then. That's it for me. I'm going to stop recording. And for anyone who's had